As an embroidery enthusiast, you know that it's easy to add one design to a project, commonly known as plop and drop. Yet when combining multiple embroideries for a continuous design, the placement requires a few more steps. If you're using an embroidery machine with a maximum hoop size of 5 by 7, I'd like to share with you my tips for continuous embroidery. This table runner has many embroideries, each end having 7 different designs. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7. Down the center, we have about 8 designs continuously put together, and then another 7 at the other end. They can be placed one by one on the project if you have a midline embroidery machine, which I'm going to share with you right now. Rather than working with a larger table runner, we're going to work with a smaller one, a pre-hem-stitched blank table runner in white, or I'm going to work with the ivory. And the first marking that I like to do is with the air erasable pen, mark the center and then the crosswise. And I've decided to use, place my design 3.5 inches above the edge of the fabric. Now I'm working with the classy floral crewel work design. You can certainly choose any combination of designs that you'd like. This is the classy floral crewel work. Regardless of the design that you're working with, the technique is the same. I'm going to place stabilizer wider than the placemat, considering that you are going to be adding embroideries all across the area. If you're just going to add one embroidery, then you'd use the traditional technique. And the traditional technique is to cut the stabilizer, the size a little bit larger than your hoop, hoop the fabric, sink that smaller inner hoop in the outer hoop, and depress the fabric so it's nice and taut. An option, rather than using the traditional hoop, is to use a magnetic hoop. And it's a snap hoop, designed by our friends at Designs and Machine Embroidery. Eileen Roche designed this 2-part hoop with magnets and then the metal section. And it can be purchased to fit your machine. Now the reason for using this is that you don't have to sink the fabric into the hoop. As you progress with your embroideries, you can simply move the hoop along. And if you needed embroidery at the very end, the reason I have the extended stabilizer is that in this position, the hoop would then be grasping the fabric and the stabilizer to make a nice area for embroidery. It's a great technique. I'm just going to be embroidering 3 placements, but regardless if you're doing 3 or 7 or 10, the technique is still applicable. So I have this large stabilizer, the marked fabric, and I'm going to place the top of my embroidery hoop, centering it, matching up the zeros at the horizontal and vertical lines. And after you get the top somewhat aligned, then the lower portion is placed underneath the hoop, and the metal and the magnets snap together, hence the name. Now at this point, take a little time to align the bottom and the top areas, and we're going to move them. And if the markings on the fabric are not aligned with the markings on the hoop, just do a little adjustment, raise the hoop and do a little shift so that you can get them aligned as much as possible. Now my classy floral crewel work embroideries are now on my computer. I've used Edit and Stitch as an editing program. Would select the embroideries that I need, and the first one that I'm going to select is the center motif. You can see on the screen I have that center motif, and then print out that design on translucent foundation paper. Here's that paper. It's sometimes used for foundation piecing and quilting, but we like to use it for printing out the design. The reason, if you're later going to be moving or switching the fabric, the design, mirror imaging it, you can see through both designs. Now this is symmetrical, but let's look at this swirl. One way you can see through it, and so can the other. So we can position our designs. First we're going to position the center motif. I've trimmed the extra paper away and aligning the grid mark the hash marks right with the pink marks, which are lined with the marks on the snap hoop. Then with tape, just position this so that we can get the needle positioned right in the center of the design. It's just a positioning tool. The fabric is hooped, it has a stabilizer, the design is centered, and now it's time to set up the sewing machine. I have the snap hoop in my embroidery unit. I've already called up the design, and now I'd like to talk about the thread. Put your thread in order, and I've used the thread tower as a way to feed the thread from the thread tower to the machine, plus organize the threads. Thread 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now there are 5 thread colors. The first thread and the 5th thread are the same color. So as a reminder, I've just placed an empty bobbin in that spool. For thread color number 1, I'm feeding it right from the spindle up through the thread guide and then down through the machine, just threading the machine using this technique so that you can organize your threads and feed them using one system. We place that template on the fabric, but we're not going to sew with it on there, but we're going to use it as a positioning guide. I've highlighted the crosshairs that's printed on the template so that I can center the needle, move the needle until I get the needle sinking right at the crosshairs. Then you can remove the template, and remove it carefully because chances are you're going to use it again at some time. So now I can lower my foot and begin the embroidery. As it starts to stitch, this first embroidery stitch is very short, and then after the first I'll just change the thread colors, rotating the spool of thread so that it's aligned with the thread guide, and do the next remaining embroideries. I'm just going to take a little time to stitch the next embroideries. I'm stitching the final color, the 5th color, and it's just about finished. And as I get to the end, which I am out at right now, you'll see that the design is complete. And as I lift this up, then it's time to work with the next color. I'll unlock the hoop, and now I have that first design completely into place. Now comes the tricky part. This is the plop and drop design. Now if you want to do continuous, we have the markings and we have the template, and we're ready to do the positioning using the same techniques of working with a template that has been printed on the translucent paper. Decide how you'd like the template to be. I'm going to have it go kind of like this, but you'll notice that it's running out of space in the embroidery hoop. So to advance this, I'm simply going to take off the top hoop, remove the hoop from the fabric, and advance it. And you can sometimes keep the hoop right in the machine, and then advance the fabric so that I have more area to embroider. Then with the top hoop, it fits right underneath the foot area. I'm going to align it again with the edges of the line up the 0. Now this may take some time to get everything just aligned so that I have it just about 1/8 of an inch from the 0 at one end, and now I'm going to scoot it so that it's 1/8 of an inch from the line at the other end, and I have it adjusted so that it's linear. Then I'll place my template, however you'd like to place it, on the fabric. Now you may take a little bit more time to get it positioned than I'm doing right now, but as you might guess, you position down the template using tape. The cross marks are in this area, and I need to change designs. So I'm going to return to my machine, and I'm going to remove the design, and then I'm going to pull up the remaining design. I have several on my memory stick, and I'll find the swirl, and then I'll set this, and now it's time to do the positioning. I'm going to then place it back to the sewing area. Every machine will be just a little bit different, and now I'll go to the layout, and in this layout area I'll be able to move my needle again to the area where I'd like it to be. Once you get it aligned exactly over the cross mark, which it isn't quite just yet. There I'll sink the needle. I'll again remove the template, remove the paper, lower the presser foot, and stitch. After you've stitched one of these, then you're going to take the design that's been printed on the template paper and invert it. It's translucent so that you can see through it. And then again position it on the other side of the design. Again, positioning the hoop, slide the snap hoop so that you're not rehooping the fabric with difficulty, just sliding it back and forth. Remove the template after you have centered the needle over the mark. If you'd like to add 3 and 4 designs, you use the same technique, just over and over again, positioning, moving the fabric, sinking the needle, removing the template. So in working with continuous embroidery, embroidery is not difficult at all. It just takes some time to work with the placement, working by stitching out the template, positioning, making sure your fabric is aligned, and these are my favorite tips for continuous embroidery. Nancy's Notions offers a full selection of sewing notions to test out your new sewing or quilting skills. Order your supplies today.